Likewise.
Hey, you got a great voice for radio there.
Well, I'm working on sitting up straight so my diaphragm can fully engage.
Okay, great, great. Now, what do you call it? I'll give you a little countdown: five, four, three, two, one. And the first question will be, Tom Wells, tell us about yourself. Who is Tom Wells? And then we can get into the, what do you think are the most important issues down here in Florida? And your assistant there said you wanted to talk about how the COVID virus got into the states and how do we deal with it?
That seems to be a pertinent consideration right
Yeah,
now. There's so many disasters that are in the wings. The treatment of unemployment in Florida
yeah,
is we're underreporting. We still have 1.1 million who got through the system and probably another million that did not. Ridiculous.
yeah. I just moved here from Nevada. Like I'm brand new, like 2 months. I don't even have a driver's license yet because the DMV closed. And I'm shocked at the services down here. There's really
Oh,
nothing. And I thought Nevada was bad.
well, Nevada votes for Bernie.
I know. I know. Yeah, but we got robbed, man. You saw what happened in
Oh yeah, no,
2016.
no. I mean,
Yeah,
well, it's been they actually planned better for this robbery.
yeah,
So
yeah. I know.
the
I
attack
know.
that Bernie would never pass anything. Bernie
Yeah.
had no response to that. I have a very powerful response to that. So maybe I'll get
Oh
around to
boy.
sharing that on the radio show.
What was that?
Maybe I'll get around to sharing that in this conversation.
Well, in this conversation today, we had exactly 21 minutes and 61 seconds to fit in everything we got to do.
Well, I'll try and
Yeah,
keep count.
okay. Well, it'll be exactly at 24 minutes and 90 seconds. Well, no, wait. Yeah, from the time we start, it'll be, no, the 21:61. Okay, I'll look at my timer. It's going to be different than yours. All right, so let's get going. You have any questions for me?
Oh no, no, I've looked at your stuff a little bit, but not enough.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. I'll give you a countdown. We'll get started here right away.
Appreciate
Okay,
the opportunity.
five, four, three, two, and go. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, and we're joined now by congressional candidate Tom Wells for District 3 down here in Florida. Mr. Wells, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for coming on our show. Tell us about yourself. Who is Tom Wells?
Well, I have. This is very succinct. I have a PhD in physics, and I have grandchildren. That means that I can read the papers about epidemiology and I can read the papers about climate science, and I need my grandchildren to have a place to live. Since there's only one planet, that count of my grandchildren is really, really pretty large, about 8 billion. And we got to learn to live as brothers.
Very well put. I really appreciate that. And you have a background in physics. I was looking at this. So you did a lot of work with microwaves in the Air Force?
Well, yeah, I worked with at Georgia Tech, which was largely DoD defense contracting, and developing stealth technology and really cool defensive stuff like that. And then I got tired of the hierarchy there and went off to a small company thinking it would be better. But there was just about as much infighting there as anywhere else. So by 2005, I decided to form my own company, and I haven't gone bankrupt once, unlike Donald Trump. So I think the background in physics is actually the mental mindset of a theoretical physicist is to back up and back up until you can see the larger problem. And that's very effective in politics. Not very many people are doing that. A lot of people are adapted to what's happened in the last 40 years, and that adaptation is destroying the country. 45 years ago, the Supreme Court basically decided that money was political speech, which is an aberrant ruling. And since then, the illegal bribery has been replaced by legalized bribery. And now it is just common practice in both parties to solicit donations from the companies that you are dealing with the legislation that impacts. So the airline company will lobby the FAA and the congressional committees that deal with that legislation will beg for money from those companies too, which makes no sense for the working class. It makes great sense for the 600.
And Mr. Wallace, so you had a solution for a campaign finance reform on your website. And I think it's rather unique. I don't think I've seen it before, about the $200 per person.
Yes, actually, I've been campaigning on that for 4 years, and I was very gratified in the first debate. Kirsten Gillibrand spoke to absolutely quite similar plan. And in science, if identical ideas or similar ideas arise independently, it's a pretty good sign that those ideas, their time has come. And the question that Kirsten Gillibrand did not address was, how do you get people to vote for that voucher funding of elections when they've been elected by corporate donations? Their donor owners will be offended if they pass public funding of elections. Their donor owners will find somebody else to fund and primary you if you vote for such a silly thing. Which, of course, means that it's not silly at all. The way you pass it is to couple it to something that will make your voters, your constituents, really happy fairly quickly, so that they will be delighted to give you that voucher money. And they can only give to people who take nothing else. By my act of Congress, very simple one-page kind of act. If you take public money, you can't take anything else, not in your campaign, not in your time in office. So lobbyists who are lobbying a straight-arrow candidate such as that would be required to visit you in your office rather than taking you out to a nice, beautiful resort. And if they want a donut, you pay for the donut. So this I call Democracy 101, because really one-on-one. Every voter would have the same input as to who makes it onto the ballot. Because right now, the two people on the ballot in most every race, both are corporate funded. And neither will pass Medicare for all. Neither will abolish the abomination of private for-profit prisons. Neither will vanquish for-profit schools, which are taking over the educational dollar. So there's so many things which need to be done. We all know, most of us understand what the right answers are, but those answers will not be enacted until we have a Congress that is reconnected to the people. We need probably 15 or 16 powerful representatives in Congress to convince the rest of them to act to redeem themselves. I get that number from the socialist work that say a revolution only requires 3.5% of the population to be actively engaged, but that is only true if you have a government that actually listens. I figure in the House, 3.5% is about 16 people, and we will be rebels, and we will be nonviolently resisting. And the point which Martin Luther King makes is that nonviolent resistance is not to end up punishing anyone. The end is redemption. He says so many things so clearly. I am privileged to quote him, I feel.
Mr. Walls, what do you think is the biggest issue facing your district, Congressional District 3 in Florida today?
Well, it's the same issue all across the country. We have a federal government that varies between dysfunctional and criminal. They have their appointees in every agency and every cabinet who are replaced if they don't show loyalty to Donald Trump.
Mm.
And that results in a government which is profiteering off of the pandemic. For a while, Jared Kushner was heading the supply of protective equipment for nurses, doctors, etc. And he was seizing shipments that governors and hospitals had bought and putting it into federal warehouses and then selling it to the highest bidder, either in our country or in other countries. This is pure profiteering. If Donald Trump invoked, and I think he finally has invoked, the National Defense Procurement Act earlier, that could not have happened. He's also insisted on treating this problem as a state level problem. Now, I've used this analogy before, but when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, Franklin Delano Roosevelt did not say, "Hey, Hawaii, what you going to do about that?" No, you have to recognize first that this is a federal problem. It deserves federal funding. You don't bankrupt the states by denying federal funding, demanding that the states pay for things and calling it bailing out the states when that you have to solve a national problem. We have a bit of a history of not reacting to disasters. We didn't, at the federal level, react to the Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans effectively under Bush. FEMA response was very pricey but very ineffective. Under Trump, the Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, and they basically did nothing, leaving people to die of waterborne diseases, reestablishing electricity. It took about a year, probably, I've lost track, 250,000, 500,000 Puerto Ricans left and came to Florida. So austerity was imposed in Puerto Rico. They're having trouble keeping schools and hospitals open because the debt to vulture capitalists is a higher priority than the debt to the people living there, paying taxes there. No, it's a dysfunctional, a contra-functional government right now, and that impacts all of us. At the state level, we're denying ourselves $6 billion a year of Medicaid expansion. That's about $50 billion over the last 10 years for no reason whatsoever. The federal government can't impact that. That's what the state legislature has to do.
Mr. Wells, before we started, you had mentioned the unemployment rates down here in Florida, but also, too, we didn't speak about it, but what about the minimum wage here in Florida? I was shocked to find that it's still only $8.
Well, at the federal level, you can't affect the state minimum wages, but at the federal level, you can affect what needs to be done and what has long been held in remiss. You need to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. There are proposals on the table to raise the minimum wage to $15 in stages out to 2024 or 2025, but it is an unjust wage. It's unjust because we worked out back in the 60s that we would take care of people who worked a 40-hour week well enough that they could have a life, they could have a place to live, a car, and raise a child. And that soon passed to both the husband and wife having to work, and now families on the lower end of the economic brackets, two jobs do not suffice. So the fight for 15 began in 2012 just by simple inflation. That should be $18 in 2021 when I arrived in Washington. And it should not be staged in because, and again I quote Martin Luther King, justice delayed is justice denied, and an unjust wage should not prevail. It should be eliminated just as fast as we eliminated the taxes on wealthy people. So the tax cuts of the last 40 years have all gone into effect instantly. Let's do the minimum wage increase likewise, give it a 3-month period for people to figure out what they need to adjust their prices to, small businesses, large businesses, figure out what their fractional labor cost is and adjust accordingly. When you do it that way, you recognize other injustices. The people who are making more than the minimum wage now should still be making proportionally more than the minimum wage. So let's write union contracts in terms of the minimum wage as multiples of the minimum wage. I actually got this idea from my wife, from her telling me about things in Brazil. A bank teller might say, I make 5 times the minimum wage or 3 times the minimum wage. Every job is described in terms of the minimum wage. So when your minimum wage goes up with productivity, then everybody's wages go up as long as you're in a union. So we'll make joining unions much easier. We'd do that by saying, oh, union members have less injuries because they insist on better safety standards. They have less stress because they only work one job. They have less medical costs, less mental health problems. They are saving the federal government money. So let the federal government pay some good fraction of the union dues negotiated on a case-by-case basis. And that would obviate the effect of right-to-work laws, which say that people not in the union still get the benefit of the union contract. Here it won't cost anything to be in the union, or very little, so everybody will be free to join unions, and they will be free to make sure their wages are in proportion to the skills, education, and enthusiasm with which they do their job. That's why they had raised wages above the minimum wage to begin with. That should continue. Oh, lastly, people on Social Security over most of their lifespan were making an inadequate wage. Let's eliminate the cap on Social Security so we can fund a just increase of minimum wage of Social Security benefits. Pardon me. Everything is connected.
The Social Security disability benefits are obscene in this country, and even the EBT programs. No one's getting by on those kind of assistance.
No, absolutely. So there's no justification. The House and the Senate keep talking about, oh, it's going to go broke. Well, it only goes broke if you want it to go broke. You have 400 families. The laws are this specific, the tax laws. 400 families at the top end, the very top end, whose rate of taxation is less than that of the bottom 20% of the population. No, if you have more money, it's easier to make more money. If you have $1 million, making another $1 million is less difficult than if you have $5 and you want to make $1 million. So that's why progressive taxes are implemented, because you're having the benefit of a strong national structure and infrastructure and education and skilled labor, and knowing that you will not be shaken down by criminals. Well, now our government is shaking down people, shaking down doctors and nurses in hospitals, shaking down the hospitals, shaking down the states. profiteering off this pandemic.
Mm.
It is incredible.
We're running out of time. We're only about 4 minutes left. Why should people vote for Tom Wells in Congressional District 3 as opposed to your opponent?
Well, I will bring a body of experience in my mind. I have been on the ground 48 months, it's pretty much 7 days a week. I've talked to around 45,000 people in this district. I've listened to them, conversed with them, looked at their problems and looked for the federal level solutions that will affect the people in Palatka and Orange Park and Ocala and Gainesville and Alachua and Newberry. The problems all originate at the federal level and they're mirrored at the state level. You first start at the federal level where you can move the big levers. We will get out of this pandemic. We will get out of it economically by just dropping all the frackers who are going broke anyway. We don't need to bail them out. We need to plant very large fields of solar panels so we never go back to the use of fossil fuel level that we've been at. This will employ many, many people, good paying jobs, and that's the basics. There'll be lots of other jobs within the energy sector, within the educational sector, because we'll raise the wages of police and teachers and firemen. Police in particular have not been treated as a profession. They need more training because they have immense responsibility, and they should be paid a wage commensurate with that. Teachers, I remember Obama visiting Singapore, and he's standing next to the mayor of Singapore and says, "Your city is beautiful and it's growing so fast. How do you find teachers for all the children?" And the guy looked up at him and says, "We pay our teachers like doctors and lawyers." The better you pay your teachers, the better teachers you have, and the less you need lawyers, because you will not be putting people under such stress that they will be tempted to deviate from the law. People have a good salary, working one job. That will be a lot different from what we have now. That will eliminate people living on the streets.
Mr. Well, how can people find your campaign website and donate and support you and volunteer?
I am certainly glad that you asked that. I am at tomwellsforcongress.com. There is a donate button. We're not stressed out if you use that. There's also a button for volunteering, and we have an all-volunteer campaign. We're building, most of our volunteers already are out of district because the issues are national, and I have a solid strategy, acts of redemption, for getting things done.
Hey, for District 3 in Florida, thank you so much for coming on the show, sir.
Ed, it is a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we're off the air. Let me ask you a question. You got anybody else? I just moved down here, you know?
Yeah.
Do you got any other guys that can interview and help out?
I'm sorry. Say that again.
Yeah. Do you have any other local candidates that I can interview and help them out?